It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Ted Abernathy. Mr. Abernathy serves as the managing partner of Economic Leadership, LLC, based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Economic Leadership is a small group of data, strategy, and policy experts working with private and public clients to analyze competitiveness, develop strategies, support leadership, and reimagine the future. Over the past 9 years, his team has worked on 146 projects in more than 20 states and internationally. Ted is the principal author of nearly 100 reports on future trends, economic and workforce development, technology, and leadership. And he currently serves as an economic advisor to the Council of State Chambers and previously held similar position to the Southern Governors Association. In his 42-year career, Mr. Abernathy has led city, county, and regional economic development organizations and an economic policy think tank. Born in Dallas, North Carolina, Ted received his bachelor's degree from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. We have a theme going this morning, or this afternoon. And his master's from Johns Hopkins University. He is a graduate of the Economic Development Institute and is an Eisenhower Fellow for Global Economics. Please join me in welcoming Ted Abernathy. Thank you.
While I won't celebrate them, I'll tell you, I do have a son that went to NC State, and a daughter at East Carolina, so in football season at least, and baseball season, we do have a multicolored household. They're in their 30s now, they fly their own flag, so it's nice that they're not in my house doing that. It is nice to be with you today. Our company works all over the country, and the economy is different in different parts of the country, and it's different in different parts of North Carolina. Half our clients are companies, so we work for the largest planned unit community developer in the country. We work for relocation analysis for companies, but we also work for 23 of the state chambers right now, and a lot of individual regions and local economic development groups. And so we hear both sides of the equation. We hear what companies care about and people care about, and we hear what governments can and can't do, and a lot about what local economic developers are frustrated with or thrilled about, or all those fun things. When you talk about the economy, you start by looking just slightly back. If I had been here a little over a year ago, I would have been certain that there would be a recession in 2023. Now, I wasn't predicting it, but most people were. And 2023 turned out to be a surprise. Almost every indicator that people thought would go this way went that way. And so we ended up with a better than expected year. We didn't have the banking crisis people thought we'd have. We had a good stock market. But we also pushed everything forward a little bit. And so when you start trying to analyze what comes next in the economy, you got to put it in some sort of context. So I want to argue with you for a minute, if you don't believe this, that the context really does matter, that what's going on globally impacts our country, what's going on with the nation impacts North Carolina, what's going on in North Carolina impacts Western North Carolina, and then impacts you. And I'll show you one slide that we think illustrates this. This is the change in jobs for North Carolina and the United States for the last 25 years. Anybody see a pattern? So what happens at the national economy matters tremendously. It's not just that any state can go out and do its own thing. Now, we're lucky here. We're the green line, and that little bit of better than the rest on the green line over the blue line is the difference in what makes North Carolina successful. Or if, like last week, I was in Louisiana, and I didn't make their line green. I made it purple because it was below that blue line almost the whole time. And so, when we're talking about the economy, there's a lot of things that matter, but one of the most important things is how the national economy is doing. People care about different things. If you ask site selectors for the work that Austin's doing, when people come to him and say, what's important, labor is always near the top of the list. Some availability of the skills are near the top of the list. Cost is always there. On the other side over here, there are things that happen locally. Your approval processes, the speed and the ease of getting things done locally, your quality of life matters. Everything's always some combination of the business costs, the labor costs, and the available infrastructure. Some mix of that, and then more recently, the lack of risk factors in community. Risk factors might be your bond rating, it might be your weather, it might be your crime rates, but it's still a risk. And business hates risk. And during COVID, figured out they hate risk even more. And so businesses are always asking us those kind of questions. So when someone's considering coming, the North Carolina cost of doing business, our corporate tax rate, our regulatory and legal environments matter a lot. We do filtering. When somebody says, and we've got a client right now, we're in the Northeast, we're going to move offices to the West or the Midwest. And here's what I want you to consider. Got to be a right-to-work state. It's got to be a state where their cost of doing business is below the national average. Got to be whatever. There's a whole bunch of these, and these filter them out. It's just a filter. In the end, and what we would say in the beginning, there were only 9 states that they would consider. Now, within those states, you start building that down to what the metros might have or what the locals might have. And so, at the metro level, there's talent supply, because people do go across county lines to work. There's the training capacity of the local community college. For the president here, I've been told numerous times, I want a community college that already works with businesses. I'm not going in and being the first one trying to break in a university president or a community college president. But if they can show me they're already working with business, check, you get that mark. Housing supply, energy supply, whether or not the place is considered a great place to live. At the local level, you've got to have the buildings and sites if you're going to be competitive. There's a dead rule in economic development. If you don't have the product, you don't get the projects. End of story. End of story. You've got to have buildings and sites ready to go, and next year is not soon enough. So, I mean, we haven't found anybody who said, let's do a search, and we're going to think about doing this in a couple, 3 years. That's just not the way it works anymore in our world. You got to have the infrastructure. You can't say, I can run a water and sewer line, it'll take me 18 months to get it out there. It doesn't work anymore. Sometimes it's incentives, a lot of time it's, can I get labor based on the quality of life of the local area? So this is a competitive business, and it's all in an economic context. I spend a lot of time talking about the economy, so I thought I'd talk about just a couple things today to get you started. Labor market being the first. So on this chart, it's a geeky looking chart. At the top line is the green bar running across. That's how many job openings we have in the country. So when we set records coming out of the pandemic lockdown, as you might expect, you send everybody home and start the jobs back over, you're going to have quite a few of them. But we're still running well above any average that we've had in 25 years of job openings. If you look at the hire rate, we're back into a norm, which is the lower green dot. So we're hiring, but we're hiring at about the rate we've hired in the past, and there's still a gap. And that gap can be guessed at 3 or 4 million around the country. If we had enough people to fill those jobs, we would fill them, and the economy would grow faster, but we don't. And we'll talk a lot about labor in just a minute. Second thing is that we are still in recovery mode from the pandemic. So this is a consumer spending and income slide. This goes back to 2007, before the Great Recession. And the blue line there is how much money people have, or how much money people spend, and the red line is how much money they have. And as you might expect, it's pretty close to the same. That makes sense. We're Americans, we spend it all, right? That's us. Well, the pandemic looked like that. So the blue line is we sent everybody home and you didn't spend any money. And the red line is we sent you a check, and we didn't get you to spend a lot of money, so we sent you a second check, and then you went crazy. No. And you bought everything you ever wanted in your whole life. I mean, more of you have wood chippers than anything I can ever. You know, you got a brand new garage door opener. I mean, you bought. And you bought, and you bought, and you bought, and now, 4 years later, we're almost getting back to normal. Think about that. 4 years of crazy, expenditures up and down. So if you're a company, and I hope I don't pick on anybody locally, I mean, if you're Peloton, and you decide in 2021 that everybody on earth needs a Peloton because they just went out and bought it, so we're going to build a whole lot more Pelotons, and 2023 comes around and you're not selling any more Pelotons because everybody who ever wanted one in their life bought it because you sent them 2 checks, then business has to get back to normal. So the person, we don't have enough people, and we're just getting back to some normalcy. We spent lots of money in the last few years because we spent $5 trillion worth of federal stimulus. In that time, we sent 70% of it to companies and individuals. And it's taken them 4 years to spend it all. At the height of this, they had put $2.1 trillion in the bank in savings that they didn't have before this started. And at the end of 2023, it's all gone. So when people tell you that retail sales is down, there's a good reason for it. You don't have the money left. And so we're back to normal on retail sales. And if you want to know what it looks like, don't ask people to compare it to 20 or 21 or 22 or 23. Compare it to 19. Because that's the last normal year before 24. And then just for fun, we thought we'd talk about inflation today. I figured you'd have pecan pie, you could take a little inflation discussion. So inflation has come down. I know there was a release this morning, I'll talk about that. But inflation is not one thing. Inflation is a bunch of things. And so a year ago, inflation was gas prices. And now, gas prices are down quite a bit. If I look at last year versus this year, I can say gas prices are down 10% or 20%. Yeah, but not compared to the year before that. What's up is still food. And we have a couple wars that are really screwing up transport links around the world. It's really messing up wheat and corn and a few other things. Down at the bottom there, we have the fact that we're still 3 million houses underbuilt in America, and so house prices continue to accelerate dramatically. I'll show you that in a second. That 20%, anybody down here in the room in auto insurance business? Yes? Okay, so if I get this wrong, come up and tell me afterwards. Don't yell at me, okay? I mean, last year was a horrible year for the auto insurance industry. There were 8 major weather events nationally that really hurt cars around the country. Hailstorms, floods. I mean, you mentioned I was from Dallas, North Carolina. When your car used to flood in Dallas, you pulled it out in the front yard where the sun shined, you open the doors, you let it dry out. It floods now, those electric systems, you basically total it. Not to mention that it costs about 10 times more than the cars that all of us had when we were that age. And so auto insurance is going up. In fact, the insurance industry is looking at a crisis in terms of both auto and housing and a little bit of health and everything else. We expect to watch that as you go forward. There was a report this morning, inflation ticked back up. So the bankers in the room, sorry about the interest rate bonanza you were hoping for in June. I would doubt it. Didn't go up a ton, but it went up broad-based. So my expectation is that it's going to stay pretty sticky for a while. And then there's the jobs issue. So let's dial down a little bit locally. So in the last 5 years, with that period of time, we don't have end of year 23 numbers that are reliable yet. They're still being doctored up. In June, we should get them. But through 22, which includes the pandemic, you can see in North Carolina, the dark green areas grew above 10%. So if you're down in my home county of Brunswick, down in the corner, you're up 10%. If you're in Raleigh-Durham area, you're up 10%. If you're in the Charlotte suburbs, you're up 10%. For the light green areas, you're one of those. You're barely one of those, almost 1%, but growth here in jobs. But you can see 40 counties lost jobs still in North Carolina. This is at a time when the state is growing as fast as any place in the country and is the #1 rated place. It isn't all just what's happening at state level. There's state and there's local. If you go a little deeper into the locals, you can see the big jump for you during that period of time was in construction workers. Now, construction work's pretty good number because typically we don't build something unless we're planning to use it in the future. So we're either building houses for new residents, we're building buildings for new workers, and so by and large, that's a good sign. But you can see across the board, you lost manufacturing jobs, again, that's happened before here, and you grew other things pretty slow rate. If you look at the manufacturing jobs, you took your hit last decade, and you took a big one here. You dropped from 14,000 jobs to a little over 5,000 in manufacturing. It's a huge hit. And it's not uncommon in North Carolina. A lot of North Carolina counties took that kind of hit. The good news is, since the recession in 2009, you've actually been growing manufacturing a little. And if Austin's right, and I think he is, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for manufacturing growth as we go forward. If you look at just the last 12 months, you're about even here. And you can see there's a lot of about even around the state. Again, those areas around the major metros grew the most. If we look forward, and we use Lightcast or EMSI as our projector, steady, limited, but steady growth going about 2%. That's fairly similar to Catawba County and Watauga County, more than Burke. Avery's the big jump there, but a small number. And North Carolina is still going to grow, but it's going to still be heavy metro growth, as it is in every state in America that doesn't have holiday makers by the coast of the mountains. I mean, you can grow your beaches and your mountains, but if you're trying to grow the other parts of the economy, it's still a strength to be close to heavy metropolitan centers. There's a bunch of charts like this, and I've agreed for that. I told Ashley she can have them. Any of you who want to, just contact them, and I'm happy to provide the charts for you. If you look at what's making up your domestic product, your output, that's the total of your economy here, you still are a heavy manufacturing, wholesale, healthcare, government sector. That's what most of your overall economy is locally. If you look at where your industry concentrations are, so concentrations are where you have a greater percentage of jobs than we expect with your average. Again, manufacturing and wholesale right at the top. You've got more utility jobs than you would think, and a little bit more retail trade because you're drawing people from surrounding counties into shop here in some areas. If you look at the most jobs, who has the most jobs here, and the little bars in the center is what you would expect based on your population. Huge over-representation in manufacturing. You're a manufacturing center, that's good for you. Also, much higher representation in wholesale trade. Wholesale trade's grown everywhere. Almost everybody has seen growth in it, but you're a strong area here with jobs more than you would expect. You want to look at what's earning? All those, that whole group over there are earning average earnings. Earnings includes wages, benefits, and overtime. More than $60,000 a year. So a lot of pretty decent jobs. From an occupational standpoint, production jobs, transport, and making jobs at the top. If we pulled every job in the county, you have an almost even split here in the county of jobs that are under $15 an hour, that's 24%. Jobs that are between 15 and 25, so quickly that's the people who make between $30,000 and $50,000 a year. That's half your group. And then another quarter make more than $50,000 a year. So it's almost a perfect arch, if you will. And not many places have that, so you're fairly evenly represented. We also looked at where you were going to grow, probably over the next 20 years, by the types of education needed. There's a whole bunch of jobs at the lower end, and these are jobs to fill. Those jobs at the lower end turnover. So the average turnover rate for a food worker is, there will be 4 different people in that job in the course of 12 months. So you get lots of churn. Might not have any net new jobs, but you get lots of churn. On the other side of this, you're going to need some registered nurses, you're going to need some nursing assistants. There's a national need for truck drivers. So there will be specific things the community college is going to train for. There are going to be specific things for 4 years. A lot of jobs that just need training post-high school. So then the most complicated issue we deal with in the country today from a competitive standpoint is workforce. The reason we have a problem with workforce is we're not having children. We used to have the average woman 50 years ago had 3.7 children. The average woman now has 1.6 children. That's 2 kids per family we're missing. That's a lot. So when you think about that, I mean, you can't replace it. Replacement, by the way, is 2.1 children. Every woman, if she has 2.1 because some kids won't get to adulthood, that's what you need. So my family is a complete failure. Well, we're win and lose. I mean, we have the cutest grandchild in the world, but I have 2 children, and that is the only grandchild we're going to have. So we're down 3 in our family. So I'm hoping some of you are making up for it, because I can tell you my wife has railed about this to my kids a lot, and nothing's happened. This is going to be the only thing. So that's Jack, and Jack someday will be governor of the state of North Carolina. Some people talk about participation rate, that people just don't want to work. Well, we actually have more people between 25 and 54, which is prime working age, higher percentage working than any time in our history. People who are prime working age are working. The problem is that we have a whole lot more people that are over 55, and the over 55 crowd works about half as much as the prime working age crowd. So from a math standpoint, all you 60-year-olds in the room that are retired are really messing up these numbers tomorrow. So I don't want to go back to work, do something. I mean, you know. The other problem we have that we have to address as a society is we're not getting kids working. We're not getting working fast enough. The numbers of the under 25 working is down at 55%. How many people in the room had a job at age 24? Raise your hand. Yeah, okay, so half of you must have kids in your basement somewhere. I don't really, you're keeping them, but get them a job. I mean, now a bunch of them are at school, so I get that. We sent a whole lot more kids. That big drop in the 90s is we made it easier to go to college. And we sent kids to school, and we said, go to school, get a job, get a part-time job, make them work while they're in school. But we have also a slew, and the number is in the tens of millions of young men in America who lose themselves somewhere in their 20s and don't get gainful employment until late 20s or early 30s, and we got to do a better job of helping those, I don't want to pick on the boys, but helping mostly young men find their way. There are a lot of echoes of COVID, things that are here look like they're staying. One of them is this retirement issue. That big bulge is all the people we thought would be working that said, nah, I'm done. Now, a few of them have come back because they figured out they're not ever going to get any better at golf, no matter how much they play. So they've come back, but there's still a big gap there. And so whether the next generation, if you're 54 in the room and you've got 57-year-old twinkles in your eyes, then I'm sorry. If you're 65 and you really wish you could work some more, go talk to some other people. You probably get there. The trick to everybody is we got to get population growth up. So North Carolina's been very lucky. We have been a receiver state for a long time. People are moving here from all over the country, and we are growing at about twice the rate of the U.S. So that's been really helpful for us. The last few years, that's even accelerated. We're almost growing 4 times the U.S. rate as people from the Northeast and the Northern Midwest move to the South and to the West. And we're one of those states that they move to. So the good news is people want to live here. If you're in Brunswick County, the bad news is they seem to all want to live near me, so I don't know what that deal is. The last couple years, there's been some strong growth in the Raleigh area, down in the Wilmington area, Charlotte. Your area of the state has been treading water. You've not been adding a lot of population, and the population that you've added has traditionally been older. So your labor force isn't growing as fast. If you look back for 25 years, your population's basically been flat in the county for 25 years. up and down a little here and there, but treading water. Your labor force actually come down some because your population is getting older and less of them are in the labor force. And then down at the bottom, you've been successful. You've added over the last 10 years, 6% job growth. You don't have any people, so you're having to import more people or retain more people that used to go out of this county each day to be in here. So this is the key question for you. And if you look at your labor force right now, even the people that are here are a little older. There's very little lack of diversity, and most of the growth has been in diverse populations. Your labor force participation rate is well below the national average. You don't have as many people as adults here getting to job every day, and you've got low unemployment. So unless you get some people off the sidelines or you grow the population some, you are stuck in this labor force trap. And it's hard to grow and bring new jobs in unless you can demonstrate labor force. Now, I'll tell you a dirty little secret, if you happen to be a business in the room, which is a lot of places, we help companies look, say, what's the average salary for those type of workers? And if they're coming from the Northeast, they're able to pay above that. They come to the community, and you get to cut a ribbon, and then one of your existing companies gets poached to the point where you lose it. And so you want both. You don't want just growth. I mean, you don't want just new. You want new and retention. And so both of those become important. If you look at the projected change in your labor force population for the next 10 years, you're not looking good. So what we tell people about projections is projections are given to you so you can make public policy decisions to make them incorrect. There's nothing about a projection that makes it true. It makes it your best guess based on past performance. This is the one chart, if I were working on your public policy to improve economic development, this is the chart I'd want to look back in 10 years and say, that guy who spoke at that lunch was an idiot. He didn't have any idea what we were talking about. We grew. This is the chart to do that. I think you have a couple really strong things to position you for the future. The first is that manufacturing has grown. As Austin said, lots of interest, and we're one of the states where it has grown a lot. This has been a very successful state. We rank states on a matrix on manufacturing strength for a bunch of the National Manufacturing Association people, and last year North Carolina finished second. It's the strongest, the highest number they've ever finished in our positioning, and so that was business climate was rated #1, workforce was rated #3. You have a history of manufacturing here, you have a workforce legacy, you have a chance to really score there. And the national brew, this is what's been invested in manufacturing. You can see for 20 years, we were just dallying along, and quite honestly, we're against industrial policies. We preached no industrial policies around the world, and then we changed our mind, and it spurred manufacturing dramatically. The other issue is that affordability has become an issue that people care about. Home prices between the first quarter of 20 and the last quarter of 23, on average in the U.S., went up about 50%. Your income didn't go up 50%, by the way. If you did, congratulations. Don't tell people around you, they will hate you, so just don't do it. But North Carolina's average house price went up 62%. 62% in 4 years. That's crazy. So if you look at average home values overall, you're affordable here. Affordability counts. A part of that is you haven't built a lot of newer housing because you haven't had the demand. New housing costs more, but you right now have an affordability advantage that could play well for you as you go forward. If you look at the change in the last year, you're going to catch up fast. You actually had higher housing price changes than North Carolina as a whole or the U.S. So when your appraiser gets around to doing this, you're gonna see some bumps coming up. Sorry about that for those of you on one side of this table, but since I was sitting with all the commissioners, all good. Life is what it is. We're gonna see weird housing markets for a while because we're all in housing construction. And with the construction community buying down rates initially. You're gonna see some more variable rates. We're one of one of the very few countries in the world that have as many locked rates as we do. Most countries in the world have variable rates that rise and fall with their national banking. This isn't, so you have the opportunity for manufacturing, you have the opportunity to sell affordability here. 3 final things you ought to think about as you go forward. The first is AI. You're not allowed to actually give a speech anymore unless you talk about AI. It's written in the contract. So, it's real. How many people in the room use some form of AI in their business currently? Right, so it'll be 100% in 3 years. The question is how much and how many people we're going to displace and what are they going to have to learn? But it's coming. And we're also buying more industrial robots in manufacturing than any time in our history. So expect the automation and the new tech to be part of our future. You know, I know that this is a touchy subject, but when your kids are playing with those devices, and you go, oh God, they're playing with those devices, they're going to play with those devices the rest of their lives. It's going to be what they do. So don't ask them to put it down. Ask them to explain it to you. That's what you can do. Good use of everybody's time. Second thing is energy. We are producing more energy in America than we ever have in the history of the country. More natural gas, more oil, more renewables. We are importing less than we have imported since the 70s overseas. Basically, we're telling OPEC and everybody else what they can do with their oil. It is a good job, it is. But AI and some of the other things have caused a whole lot of people to start looking at whether the baseload projections that were true 10 years ago are true into the future, and it's scaring them to death. So watch your power. Make sure that you talk to your power providers and they're ready for the future, because if you're recruiting manufacturing, you're going to be talking power as life goes forward. And the third thing is about education. So yes, we sent too many kids to four-year colleges, but we didn't send enough to engineering school, to nursing school, to teaching school. We still need a whole bunch of four-year people. So four-year colleges are not evil, they're important. We're going to do a better job of career training. But that big jump there is in credentialing at 2 years. Yeah, go ahead, clap. You must be popular, they're pandering to you. It's great, it's good. We have to do a better job as a society preparing people for the jobs of the future. You have to do a better job as parents preparing your kids for preparing for those jobs for the future. The bar is not going down, it's going up, but community colleges are going to be the key as we go forward. Last thing, when you're thinking of competitiveness here, I know you've done some strategy work in the county recently, be specific about your actions, be realistic. Make sure that the stakeholders in the room and elsewhere are aligned, measure everything. And in communities like this, you have leadership that is rooted in this community. We refer to them as stewards. They're rooted in places. Don't ignore them. They have deep roots into these communities, and they care about them. But you also have to bring on new leaders. I can't tell you the average age of the people. We go into communities and they put 30 people in the room with us, and the average age is never under 55. And I was in a room recently where the average age was 81. I think there were only about 15 of them. And they were right, those people should have been in the room, but they had kept others out of that room. And the future was not sitting at the table. The power was sitting at the table, but the future wasn't. So build on that leadership in your community. I know Boss and I are both happy to answer any questions as we go forward, but thank you very much for inviting me. On my way home back to the coast, I get to go by Dallas, see my 90-year-old mother, and so it's always a good day on the way up. I stopped in Greensboro to see my only grandchild, so this is a great trip, so thank you very much. Anybody else? You can ask me anything. I had to do the West Virginia legislature about a week ago, so I don't think there's anything you can ask that I haven't heard this week.
So when you read the news, the general feeling is to be scared. Is that really the case? Should we feel that way?
Well, depends on what you're scared of.
Well, as a business owner looking at investing, looking at short-term and long-term for years now.
Yeah, so the question is, if you listen to somebody, you ought to be scared. So everybody's trying to scare you. They're just trying to scare you about different things.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I don't, if you have a recession later this year, which some people started re-predicting this morning, and by the way, people have been predicting recessions now for almost 36 months, and recessions tend to occur every about 60 months, so at some point all the economists will be right? There will be a recession. I don't think you're going to feel a deep one. I think that the U.S. is positioned as the fastest growing major economy in the world. It's not fast because GDP growth is productivity, which has been slow, but AI might pick it up. It's been slow for 20 years, times the number of people. Well, you heard the people problem. So that's what GDP is. So we're not going to see macro growth numbers that are going to make eyes pop. The small business, depends on what industry you're in. If you're in the future energy business, business is going to be brisk. If you're in the healthcare business, business is going to be brisk. If you're in the home building business, there's high demand, but if you're in the banking business, you're not giving out mortgages right now. You will, but I know nobody wants them, so it's okay. That's it. It depends on what industry you're in. I don't see any major crash coming. I think there'll continue to be cycles. I think we work in almost an equal number of R and D states. The numbers of R and D states that do well and not well is traditionally not about the R's and D's. Sorry for all the R and D people that care a lot in the room. It's just not the way this works. Cycles work differently, and what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on in the Middle East and what's going on in the South China Sea matter as much to what your breakfast cereal costs as anything any politician does in America. So look at the big picture, and from a big picture standpoint, nothing terrible, but it certainly won't be as good as $5 trillion of stimulus made the last couple of years, because that's fantasy land, and that's once in our lifetime. I think if you'd taken a bet in 18, it would have been none in our lifetime. Nobody would have ever thought we'd have printed. Let's just be clear about it. We printed $5 trillion and gave it away $1. Won't happen again, I don't think. So I wouldn't be frightened, but I'd be vigilant. Life changes. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Where do you see regions of commercial real estate going up and down?
That's a great question. So where is commercial real estate going up and down? So let's do sectors first. Industrial sector is going to continue to rise. Warehousing sector, I think, is going to level off. It popped there for a while. You probably have 1 million warehouse requests that there weren't any buildings for a while, but I think it'll level off some. The office sector is in trouble, especially in the urban office sector. You're looking at, $250 billion of losses probably in that sector, and in certain places down. Retail's done better than people thought. It's actually at the lowest vacancy rate in the last 2 generations at 5%. It's because nobody built any for a while because they were scared. And 78% of purchases are still brick and mortar purchases. So we ticked up 3 or 4% on e-commerce, but then we leveled back off. So retail's going to be fine. Housing market will be fine as soon as interest rates come down. Where Midwestern, more affordable communities are doing better. Believe it or not, Fargo, Des Moines, Omaha, Kansas City, Tulsa, they're doing better. If you look at the data, San Francisco, Los Angeles, some of those places really took a huge hit during the pandemic. They're coming back. So if you look at 3-year data, it looks like they're having a great run. If you look at 6-year data, they're still in the hole trying to find their way back out. In North Carolina, Charlotte and Raleigh, Durham still have the advantage. Greensboro's announcements have helped the triad. If Boom and Wolfspeed and we do work for Toyota, they're gonna build. They don't announce till they say they're gonna build, so they're gonna put billions in. That'll help that area of the state. Asheville and Wilmington have its own thing going. The quest is going to be, if you can build the product, and you're an hour from everywhere here. If you build the product, then you'll have some chance around here. I think sort of second tier, what would be ex-urban to urban areas are the most likely area to have the most growth going forward. Thank you, I appreciate it.
After all we talked about
We got commissioners,
okay.
and he's at my table.
After all you talked about, what keeps you up at night?
Couple things. America's inability to decide anything keeps me up at night. I'm old. I mean, my first job ever, I told this table, was with the mayor of Baltimore in 1980. And it was rough and tumble big city politics, but you made a decision, and if you had to, you went to the governor's office and you told them what, and then you went down to Congress and they passed a bill and life went on. I mean, things happen. So that bothers me that we can't do that now. What bothers me the most right now is the geopolitics in the world and how intertwined our economy is with geopolitics, and how we haven't been good for about 15 years at playing globalization games. And this is last 4 presidents. You can pick your sides on this, but none of them have played well, and we've enjoyed a post-World War II only game in town kind of model. Then from the 60s forward, we set the international rules and everybody had to play because we were the biggest thing on the block. And so the rules favored us. And now some people have figured out that maybe they should play on a field that isn't our home turf. And I think that will be a problem. The fact that our population is shrinking puts us in a position, doesn't mean it's terrible. Denmark's populations, they have a good economy. Japan has a now recovered economy. You have a good economy, but it's hard to, if India's got 1 billion people and China's got 1 billion people and Indonesia's got 1 billion people eventually, it's hard to be 300 million and shrinking and think you're going to be the biggest bear on the block. So that's what keeps me up. Thanks a lot.